Bonjour à tous. Merci infiniment
Thank you
de
very
votre
much.
présence. Vous êtes venus de si loin, d'Alger, d'Algérie et de par et ça nous touche infiniment que
We
vous
are
soyez
very
là avec
delighted
nous.
that you are here with us to share this beautiful adventure with us. We would like to start now because we are late schedule-wise, and I would like to thank Mrs. Nabila Lagoon for hosting us in this very beautiful space that our friend Halim knows well, allowing us to meet today. Without further ado, I'll give him the floor. Mrs. Lagoon, the floor is yours.
Bonjour.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to the Modern and Contemporary Art Public Museum. I would like to hail the initiative of Nacym, which allowed us to meet all this prestigious panel and this public, honoring us with its presence. I'm very not speeches are not my forte, but I would like to hail this initiative because I believe that we do need to talk about these very important issues about the future of our cities, considering that the architecture in the field of art is more expressive of man's ideals. That is why we saw that civilizations were built by builders, and man has always been building to live, to pray, and for entertainment purposes. I would like to thank you all for honoring us to come and discuss all these issues. Wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Alors,
Prior to getting started, this event couldn't take place without the support and sponsorship and encouragements of many partners who are with us today. Some of them are not here. We are very delighted. It wasn't easy to set up this event. First of all, I would like to thank the Wilaya of Algiers for its support and encouragement in this project since the beginning. I would also like to thank the Mama Museum for hosting us in this beautiful space. I would like to thank Ibu, Mrs. Julia Kassab, for her help in this project. And I believe that it does show the commitment of the Architecture College and its openness to this kind of initiatives. I would like to thank Hakim Sofi and the CR. He's not with us today, but he's someone who's believed in the project since its outset, since day one, and helped us set up this project. I would also like to thank the Italian Cultural Institute that allowed us to bring our guests, and we're very delighted about their presence among us today. I would like to thank Yassir for its support in this event. They were present 24 hours a day. I would like to thank our friends from Iris, Murad Al-Wadah, who's here, who's always supported this kind of initiatives, especially when it's about sustainable development and renewables. I would like to thank Mr. Jamaldin Shalom and Amanhid, who haven't spared any effort in supporting us to organize this event. Finally, I would like to thank our friends, the architects, Larbi Marhoum and Halim Taibi, MLM and Studio Art, who have directly joined us, but many others contributed, even though indirectly. I would also like to thank Huffington Post for their support as a media partner, Casper Tribune, which covered the event and the project from the beginning. I don't know whether Riyadh is here. they've been doing wonderful things for youth, without forgetting our friends from Bendy Network with Maya. I don't think she slept today. MediaCorp, Safia and El Hadi, and Lamara's Hotel, finally, which allowed us to accommodate our foreign friends. Hope I haven't forgotten anything, but it was important to say this. Let us now directly move to an introduction about the Algiers meeting. We've called it the Algiers meeting because it sounded obvious to give a highly strategic dimension to the profession, and to say that an architect is not alone, but surrounded by people and only a link of a whole chain of society. So we do not do things or think alone. I think that the Algiers meeting is for architects, but for everyone from around the world. You will see that in the different panels later. And it's not only for us, for Algerians, which is why we have the pleasure and the honor to have received eminent figures who have supported us in this project, and distinguished guests who are with us today. The title of this event is Towards Descriptive Urbanism.
Disruptive?
Disruptive urbanism. It is a common word in the tech, and we've tried to understand what this concept is and to take ownership of the concept, particularly in the way we design cities. We told ourselves that today things are speeding up, accelerating. Cities are expanding more and more, and populations are more and more urbanized. But we continue to use tools going back to the 20th century, and we'll talk about that later, as if we did not shift to the 21st century yet, as if there was a gap with that fabulous speed surrounding us. So we told ourselves, why wouldn't urbanism be disruptive itself, to come and disrupt things and things to be done differently, for us not to be always cocooned in a bureaucracy, and to say that perhaps we can do things differently, to imagine future cities. This first image that you see here, and I like it, goes back to 1960. It's one of the rare aerial shots of that era. It represents Algiers, but there are many things there. This is a fighter. It's called a Mystère. It also gives some mystery to this image. That was in 1960. If we go back to the context, during the National Liberation War, Algeria was at the eve of its independence, and we see that the context is very important here. For me, this image features what we want to do. We guess what Algiers wishes to be and its ambition. Therefore, we cannot neglect the fact that it refers to Corbusier and his obsession with aerial shots and aviation in general, and gives us a perception, a particular perception. Next slide, please. No. So this is the aerial layout. Every time I see Algiers, I relate to this extraordinary layout which shows ambition that Corbusier had for Algiers. And in parallel, this was a period where the Siams were created, and in parallel, I can't help but do the parallel with Algiers and what we can build together. Why is what was done at the beginning of the 21st century in the 30s? We're 100 years later. Why aren't we able to imagine architecture and urbanism differently? As you know, Siams, 1928 and then 59, it started in Switzerland and ended in the Netherlands. For us, Algiers is fully capable of carrying an ideology or a project to strategy this dimension. So the Algiers meeting is part and parcel of this process. Next slide, Algiers. For us, the issue of scale is raised. Yesterday, we toured Algiers together with a group. It's beautiful, but it was hard. Because it took us a full day on a Friday. So in ideal cases where there was no traffic, however, it took us a full day to visit the bay from east to west. So we conducted a visit in reverse chronological order. We started by the by the Tower of Temenfust, and then we came back to Algiers to explain for people who do not know Algiers, or only knowing in literature, cinema, or magazines, to be aware of the Algiers dimension, this territory and what it carries, but also its scale, which is why we overlapped these two images to show the scale and to say that the Bay of Algiers can include all Manhattan Island. And that's what it is about. It's about the bay as a territory and what we need to do with that. All this has led us to start a project called the Algiers Bridge. Perhaps some of you know already that we wanted to federate us. We initiated it in an exceptional way as we shared it on social networks with the public and with the Algiers population. For us, it was important. It was the cornerstone of the whole process. So we started with the sharing, with dreaming and reflecting ambition, but a lot of optimism for our youth. We call that as a founding act of a new Algiers, and it all started with this sentence. I cannot forget to thank all these wonderful people who supported us. Some of them are here. Others apologize for not being able to make it. And especially Nicolas, who prepared everything. Her flight ticket was ready with her hotel accommodation and visa. Not easy to get a visa, but to the last minute asked me to apologize for a family event that prevented her from attending. I can't think of everyone, but I believe that you will recognize them because you're all here, and we would like to thank you because without you, we wouldn't be able to organize this day. The Algiers Bridge you won't find any image about a bridge. It's quite subliminal and imaged, and we want it to remain such. We don't want bridge to be only associated with attraction or concrete, but associated to an image or a social vector of cohesion and a vector of living well together, of tourism and economic development, and to say that Algiers can be a bridge, and we can have a bridge over the Bay of Algiers that we can visit with the floating islands that we suggest, and that we can admire, and not to say that we are showing our backs to the sea, but the sea is part and parcel of us, and such sea is a territory that is going to give back structure and cohesion to Algiers tomorrow. Quickly, it is about simple matrix as a backbone or an exoskeleton, something that comes to support and to back the dynamism and recenter the center of gravity of Algiers back into the bay, giving lots of optimism. And going back to youth now, we'll talk about that later, because there was wonderful support and investments from everyone, giving ambition, and that is very important. But also learning to have a future vision for the city and for the country. The metrics will be rediscussed in the competition that we will present later. This is the T-shirt that I'm wearing today, and we just received it, and I'm proud of wearing it. For us, Algiers is entitled to have a strong identity and symbol, and saying I love Algeria is not something old-fashioned or old, but it's a reality, and we need to relate and belong to that. For that purpose, time-wise, we started late, and let's go directly to the discussions. And these discussions, you will see that it's not a panel it's not a conventional panel, but some sort of a roundtable with a topic that we've identified. You can read it on the screen. 4 main topics: architecture, sociology and urbanism, social engineering, tech and finance, teaching and sustainable development and youth,
art.
and finally, art, design and media. For us, architecture has to face all these disciplines. That is of paramount importance. An architect is not someone who is cocooned in their office, or perhaps fabulating or having fantasms, but share their vision and passion and ambition with the whole society. And Algiers meeting is about that. I would like to invite the first roundtable members: Larbi Marhoum, Samia Henni, Pipo Troba, Jamel Kilouche, Andrew Halim Faidi, Donald Bates, and Stefan Sachs.
Quelle belle broche.
What a nice mixture. Is everyone comfortable?
En plein dans. Samia, tu peux venir un peu plus grand. Donc je vous préviens,
I warn you, I will be timing. Don't blame me if I ask you to stop talking. But it's also about learning to do things well in a timely fashion. Sorry in advance for limiting your speech time. We've got 45 minutes in total, including questions that will be asked by the public or in social networks. There will be questions, some of them on Facebook, and that will be forwarding them as time goes. If you have a connection, you can also do that in order to save time. Otherwise, we won't be able to finish. If you don't have network connection, you can text your question. I'll give you the number: 0770 90 40 10. That's quite simple to remember. You can ask your questions and we'll select a few to forward them to the panel. The topic of this discussion and roundtable is what we said earlier about urbanism tools. With your kind permission, what we said is that we'll try to open the debate with you to draft a new page together on the necessity of henceforth thinking urbanism and city differently, considering the profound changes that society lives today, together with the spectacular acceleration of communication and ICT resources. Current urbanism tools seem obsolete, and you tell us what you think about that and the necessity of thinking and about the future of the city differently is inevitable. And Algiers is here, and it's the pretext, but also the example and the background, because we're not only talking about Algiers. Algiers is material discussion to talk about this issue, but we need to think beyond Algiers. Without further ado, let's start with Larbi. You've got 2 minutes. What can we say in 2 minutes? It is true that urbanism instruments that we use are part and parcel of the contemporary history of Algiers, are tools that were invented in the 60s when the land was 0 dinar worth and the square meter was cheap. We were in a directed economy, but we've changed about 15 times the prime minister and 3 times the political system, and pretty much the same results. I think that we have poor instruments for urbanism, and it is a dead end. For me, it is a political dead end as far as territory is concerned, and I think that ICT is going to displace the center of gravity. It's no longer about having a physical address, but an email address. I think that the stakes for the territory is changing. You spoke about open source city. Absolutely. Open source city can be an alternative to the absence of the political space and policies. So things will be done outside of the system, and it could be interesting. Wonderful. We will continue with Jamal now. Well, you're sitting there, so we'll give the microphone to Jamal. In 2 words, yeah. What can I say about the disruption? We had lunch with Larbi earlier today, and we were saying something very interesting. I think that Algiers is already disruptive because there is a system, but everyone violates that system. What does disruptive urbanism mean in a system that isn't? I think that we are in a city, and I'm talking about Algiers here, where self-organization is extremely present, and self-organization is going to impact disruption by excellence. And in other circumstances, I spoke about the disorder ecology, meaning that in all these developing countries today that are building their future, like Algiers or Algeria, where we see when we go about in the city, especially in suburbs, this perception of disorder. And as far as architects are concerned, it's about reorganizing space, but it is impossible to do so, to put some order in that space. It's more about building. So I think that disruptive urbanism is a new order. So we have the capacity to work on these major metropolises. So if there is, we're not going to reinvent the history of urbanization around the world. I believe that 70% of mankind will be living in major cities, especially in Southern American countries. And I believe that the image that is most recurrent is the issue of disorder and how we can have the disorder ecology, and that is the definition that I wanted to give as a start. Thank you, Jamal, for the challenge and for your experience. Halim Faidi, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you for choosing this venue to serve as an open space for the question of urbanism instruments. I'm going to talk more about urbanism, but for urbanism instruments, I believe that we already have the instruments that allow us, if we have methodology, intelligence, hard work, with the right people in the right places, to manage a city of 4.5 million inhabitants and any other city in Algeria today. And I frankly think so. We have all the legal arsenal to do so. It looks weird to say it here and now in this project. However, this project needs to be supported, and why I supported the Algiers meeting and the Algiers Bridge, and I will continue to do so, because we still aren't all aware that the world is changing. And if, as of now, we do not make the right choices, we may miss history with other peoples, other civilizations who would make more comfortable and secure choices. When I say the world is moving, it's the city that will be changing in the next 35 years. There will be a major flow towards cities. World population today in cities represents, or urban population today is 50% of the world population, and will reach 75% of the population by 2050. And we are not certain that we will be able to contain the 800 million African migrants that are leaving the misery of their rural areas to find the heaven of cities. And cities do not host them today, just put them in HLM type accommodation, but also millions of people from Southeastern Asia to Europe also today. So the question of urbanism today was asked 30 years ago with Barcelona, with Juan de Busquets. So humanist urbanism that will put man at the center of its mechanism, but man is becoming an increased.
We are decolized from our memories and our brains within these connected items, and that will remain connected. We are biomechanized, and soon, I don't want to frighten you, but it's always the same story. Whenever there is a revolution, as such revolution, we don't reject it because we are in a comfort zone and we are happy in our comfort zone. And those comfort zone can move, let us move or move aside or not. I love the future. I like the future, but what I love is the city of the future, because in our dishes we will have milk, we will have tomatoes. The most important is some automatives, but the society will change over time because the world is moving and the world is changing. Start thinking from now on a new way. I don't know this new thinking of producing a city, managing a city, a new city. You know that we are in that new city that was Algiers after the French government. We are in a new city of Algiers. How to manage these new cities? We call them smart cities because there is no other words to be used. And it's a nice word to use it. It's trendy. Start from now on, even if we have the instruments, the tools, but we don't have the people, the drivers. We had to hang on the world of tomorrow, which is already starting today. That's, for me, the instrument. The urbanism is a science of strategy. It is not aesthetics. It is only an element, that's not an element that will come later. I've put aesthetic and beauty on the core of that. Maybe don't think about physics. Move forward. Go beyond that ideas. Go beyond this key of physics. Thank you, Hakim. We will go back to you later. Stefan Zaks, you can do it in English. Or an English speaker, you have headsets on the back of this room, and you can use them.
Oui.
And you can make your presentation in English.
To introduce myself, I'm a journalist by trade. Founded a project in my hometown of Flint, Michigan, in the area of Detroit, which is focused on transforming precisely the identity of place through a similar kind of provocation that is, I think, being introduced through this project. And so it's some interest to me to look at what is the thinking behind it, what is the methodology, and what are the potential processes that could be set in place to reimagine Algiers and to provoke a new thinking about what is Algiers, both to people living in the city, as well as presentation of the image of the city to the outside. And so the bridge is an enormous, provocative image, a possibility that could fundamentally change the way that people think about the place, whether in reality it should be constructed or not. Producing a sort of new image, a new identity of the city, I think should be at the forefront of this kind of strategic thinking that you're setting in motion, which I think should be connected as well to the project of revitalizing the Casbah, and in general thinking through what are the social political processes that are governing space, governing the circulation of capital, governing the national resources, governing the distribution of wealth of the country, and ideally bringing the public as much as possible into this process of being able to act, to reproduce the city, to produce a new city through engagement, through strategic investment of capital into local projects that serve local publics.
Stéphane,
Yeah,
one question.
sure.
Vous êtes à Alger pour la première fois. Vous venez de New York. Quelles
Oui.
sont vos premières impressions? On a fait donc le tour hier. Vous avez vu ce que c'était Alger. Moi, j'aimerais savoir quelles sont votre première impression.
Of Algiers.
Well,
Je souligne, pardon, que vous êtes
I'd like to
journaliste
say
et
that you
critique
are
d'architecture.
journalist
Donc vous
and
avez une vision,
architectural critics.
j'aimerais avoir
So you
votre
have a
vision par
special
rapport à
vision
ce
when
que
you get
vous
to a
êtes.
city.
Voilà.
I want to have this
Of course,
idea.
it would be incredibly
Bien sûr, c'est-
immodest of me to be able to
Ce
to
serait
make any kind of
orgueilleux de ma
large
part
claims
de
based on
faire,
24 hours of
de faire
being in the city.
de me faire une opinion en 24 heures. Mais je peux vous donner une sorte de réaction impulsive, une idée.
You know, an experience. I think, you know, just to talk about coming, you know, the process of coming from New York
Yeah.
to Algeria. Maybe I'll preface it with
Yes.
saying that last year I intended to travel through Algeria en route to Venice. In thinking that as someone watching the U.S. struggle with its identity in relationship to its southern border, that and looking at some research that was done about how the Mediterranean functions as a sort of border between Europe and Africa, I was interested in traveling from France to Spain, Portugal, and crossing into Morocco, and then traveling around the Mediterranean to Venice for the architecture biennial. And I found, having not planned extensively and taken for granted the incredible privilege of being an American citizen, that we generally experience borders as being very open. That I was not able, without having planned in advance, to travel through Algeria, and instead didn't come, and flew instead directly to Venice. Just as an example of a kind of advocacy that I would put forward as a basic principle, going back to this notion of the open city, that I think there's a great opportunity in Algeria to make a huge leap forward in terms of openness, even if it isn't reciprocated on the other side, to make the gesture of being a kind of capital of liberation. I mean, there's a great history of anti-colonial struggle that is of enormous global interest, that can be a fundamental center of national identity, and that can be a contemporary inspiration. But I think that making this leap forward in terms of putting the colonial border behind and opening up free travel into Algeria, certainly from the West, would be an enormous starting point. And certainly, just as a quick, you know, experience of what I experienced from, you know, wandering around, I like to say hello to people on the street.
Okay.
Right? And
Yes.
and you get a signal when you say hello to people of a kind of a temperature, of a spirit of place. Do people say hello back, or do they feel closed? And I would say that it's a very open city from this respect.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Merci Stéphane. Et j'aimerais passer maintenant à...
Thank you, Stefan. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Bates. He's coming from Melbourne in Australia, And he did 21 hours by flight to get to Algiers. I will never thank him enough to make such an effort to meet us here in Algiers. And I would like to give him the floor. Donald is the director of the architecture faculty of Melbourne. We would like to, first of all, Donald, I would like to have your point of view. First of all, I will tell you a story. First thing he did, he went to Qahwat Shergi. It is a street. He took the tramway of Algiers by himself. He went to Qahwat Shergi, which is in the east part of Algiers. He spent a memorable time over there. So the first 24 hours of his arrival, he used public transportation. He had this experience autonomously. I would like you to give me your first impression. I would like to speak in English, excuse me, because my French is not very good.
I'll answer your question about my impressions of Africa, my impressions of Algiers in a minute. But I guess what I wanted to say was I've been very fortunate. The reason I live in Melbourne is because 21 years ago we won a competition for a project in the center of Melbourne. And after building it for 5 years and it opened, we were lucky because it was a project that changed the city. There are many other projects in Melbourne that have also had a very big effect, but it was a project called Federation Square, and it very much shifted the center of gravity for the city. And my experience of that was to understand that we tend to think of cities as being a bit like people, that cities have a particular character and that the character is fixed, that we think we know somebody, we think we know this politician or this writer or this actor or this friend, until one day we find out they did something else, or they choose to do something else. And suddenly they're not the same person we thought they were, that we were sure who they were, we knew who they were. And the thing about that for me is important is to imagine that for a city. So the city we think we know, Algiers, Melbourne, New York, Paris, Las Vegas, there are acts that are possible that mean what we think we know is not what we think it is. And so the possibility of a few acts, a single act, one détournement, which changes everything about how we imagine the city to be. So it's not just an incremental transformation, it's not just a historic evolution, it's something that totally changes the way we imagine a city. And so I think my interest in the project that's being proposed here is not about it as a kind of object, about whether we like the architecture, whether we like the infrastructure, whether we like the engineering. It's about what kind of experience does it produce of the city in order to understand the city in a way, not just that we never imagined, but we never imagined how we would imagine it. So I'm interested in how architecture, urbanism redefines, recharacterizes what we think of as cities. And it's not just some sort of historical continuum that we fit ourselves into. In terms of my relationship, my experience of 3 days now in Algiers, there are three things that are important to me. One was the bay, the scale of the bay, and how beautiful and amazing it is. And the Kasbah, I mean, you know, I've wanted to come for a very long time to experience it, and it fulfilled all those expectations. But the thing I didn't expect was the tram and the metro, which I think are absolutely amazing. They're amazing that they're here. I would never imagined it. that's my prejudice of not imagining this could possibly happen in Africa, in North Africa. Melbourne has the largest tram system in the world. It's been there for over 100 years. But for me to take the tram 2 days ago was to really feel like this is a city where you can do anything. And the other was yesterday when we had our tour and we looked at some of the sort of social housing, and I don't even know the names of the architects that we saw. Bouillon. Incredible. Fantastic. So for me, now I have a new Algiers in my mind from that experience.
Merci beaucoup, Donald. Merci. Hu Onru, merci d'être là. Hu Onru est le directeur artistique du musée Maxi de Rome, que vous connaissez tous parce que, entre autres, dans la forme réalisée par Zahi.
Because in the form as made by Zahi Hadid, but also in context, he's very important, that it's very interested in all what he produced, and as activity and as exhibitions he did. So, Andrew, what are your first impressions, and then, do you think that the tools, urbanism tools, are old-fashioned right now, or is there a new way to avoid, or maybe to discuss the vivacity in other terms and in other ways? First of all, I have to tell you all, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And Champagne, talking about Champagne. First of all, I would like to say, whereas working at the Maxi, I'm learning every day how you ski in a building. That is a great architecture. We had an architect that he gave us a great background, an ambition, urbanistic ambition, instead of being an architecture one. That force us, that push us to participate to a kind of unknown adventure, how to use a building that is supposed to be a museum, a modern museum. And in the meantime, this architect is given an interchanger, kind of an interchanger in a highway, or another terminal in an airport. I was talking to my colleague people how to navigate our ways in these gates, in these terminals, in these big areas, in this big confusion. But those confusions are very important because they take us to look at things with a different vision, like other projects. And that pushes you also to have another point of view. So those gates helps you force us to be in the sea, to change point of view. This movement toward the sea make us think to a topic that we discuss less and less, that is namely, does it exist? Do we have a city, Mediterranean city? Do we have a Mediterranean city? I worked in Beirut, in Istanbul, and that's my first trip to Algiers, and I found that there is a lot of Mediterranean cachet stamp here. We work in Italy. My work in Italy is in the same optic, in the same context. There is a very similar aspect on being in the Mediterranean. For example, this colonial city, the colonial downtown with history, and this combination with the sea, that gives us another view from what we thought about Algiers, this future city. Can we still talk about it? Can we still about this limited historical elements, these cliches, and so on. Do these cliches exist? That's the question that we can ask. All the Mediterranean cities are being pushed toward a competition in order to be smarter. They all want to be, they're competing to be more advanced, smarter, with various steps being, new constructions being built, how to displace, how to have connectivity within the city. That reminds us also, in this book of Richard Selleck, in a paragraph or chapter of his book, he's talking about a critical thinking about architecture. He's saying the city became smarter and people are becoming dumber and less active. And that's a question, that's a thinking, that's a debate we can have. Yesterday, I had the chance with the group to visit various areas, among them the Kasbah, and I forgot the name of this person who talked about the city. Do you remember the name of this? He showed us a building in the Kasbah. Can you tell me about it? I forgot the name of the man. Ammi al-Haj Zubair. So the man who showed at the Kasbah is Ammi al-Haj Hussein. Excuse me, I will really do my best next time to learn some words in Arabic. So Ammi al-Haj hosted us in an old house in the Kasbah. We visited the house, and he has a well, very deep well. And he showed us how to drop water, not champagne, how to get water from the well, and from down to top. And it takes at least 8 seconds to reach the bottom of the well. The other really thing that impressed me is the entrance. The entrance of the house. He explained to us why we had this important entrance where we are all seated. Simply, the city is not, the guests have to wait at the entrance, or maybe we don't want to receive these guests, so we sit them at the entrance because we have to think about how to receive them inside later, and maybe the house is not well addressed, but it is a waiting room. It is this waiting room, and that can be a new idea for us, architectural ideas, to see how will we build our houses, future houses, how can we receive our visitors. This is Mrs. who is cooking behind the walls. Those elements are tools, urbanism tools, that allow us to think how and why we build our houses, how to move forward. This morning also I had the pleasure to visit the workshop, the wide workshop, where you have various artists working there, supported by Mrs. Wasila Tamzali, Mrs. Wasila Tamzali. What I wanted to say in this regard, one of the artists showed us an image where his double image of a picture, of self-pictures. And he said that he's inspired by people, by employed young people in the street. They are standing back in their back by the wall, and that's a very beautiful vision, how to show the wall. And this wall allow you to have a vision of the world. It's a school. It is an urbanist school, actually. Thank you very much, Andrew. And Samia Hani, we are giving her from. She's from Cornell University, from the United States, going through Netherlands and Switzerland, and she just published a book, issued a book. We are waiting for it a long time because it has not been translated yet.
It's called Architecture and Revolution. It's about a very important problematic concerning urbanism in particular, but urbanism during a very particular period that we've inherited today. The floor is yours. I would also like you to talk about your research, what you've written in the book, but also link that to urbanism instruments. Is there a paradigm shift here? Thank you for organizing this meeting. Prior to answering your question, allow me to answer Donald. I'll do it in English.
Donc je vais le faire très rapidement en anglais parce que vous avez parlé.
Très rapidement, juste, pour moi c'est assez important. You talked about experience.
Donc je vais parler de l'expérience.
But how can you experience a city without having assumptions? And in a way, the way that you discuss, the way that you describe the fact that we have a tram or we have public transportation for you, it's a surprise. I think we should not visit a city, we should not experience a city with our own assumptions. I think that's for me very, very important as well. Having said that, je retourne à sa question. Enfin, pour moi, la grande question.
The major question, or one of the very important questions, because there's so many major questions, but one question I've been asking myself related to my work and this meeting is how to understand, how to represent life and the lives in cities, different lives of cities, which are extremely important. And I'm talking about the lives here because when we represent a city by an aerial shot, you don't see anything, just shapes, blank and white and black spots and areas, and that doesn't allow you to understand the social and urban network occurring, and that could occur in that city. That's what we were saying yesterday when we went to Burj Al Kifan, going to Tamanfust town, where when you see it from an aerial shot, it looks perfect, but then when you visit it in reality, you see the diversity, you see the chaos, and what can it represent? Sorry for interrupting you. No, it is very important. It's not only graphic representation, but it is a profound reading of the urban network and the life of that city and what's built in it. Now, going back to what Donald said, and which was quite Orientalist, but what Le Corbusier did in the 30s, the image that you've also used is an extraordinary gesture. I think that we don't need that in the 21st century because it doesn't serve a purpose. And Le Corbusier in 1930 was at his first drawing concerned the centenary of the colonization of Algeria. So he hadn't even come for the first time to Algiers, to be closer to what was happening there. So it was an extraordinary gesture that was well thought out and important for historians and architects. But I believe that for aesthetics, that was quite masculine, quite manly to do. And I believe that what we need today is a deep analysis of the urban network and to have a team that speaks, collaborates, and tries to use a military terminology to suggest flexible tactics and strategies to meet continuous changes in length. Thank you very much, Samia. People? Would you like very poor French or so-and-so? We like your French. And we know that you love Algiers, so in French, please. To include what Samia just said, I understood Le Corbusier only when I came to Algiers. When did you come here again? Was that 1981? And I believe that the most important aerial view or layout to understand Le Corbusier is Algiers. I'm here also to pay a debt because I came to Algiers in 1982 as a student, and my dissertation was about the high plateaus, the Midlands, and an agricultural project then that was presented during the bicentenary of the architecture, Islamic architecture. So I owe Algiers. Now, for the question that you asked, I believe that the idealist vision of traditional and modern urbanism was the idea of a strategic action that covered pretty much everything, like Brasilia, or you plan and you put all the conditions, and we all walk towards the same direction. I believe, as was said earlier, that the 40 years ago we understood that that doesn't work, and that in the 90s we lost our time. After the idea of the metropolis chaos, we were very excited, I must say, about the chaos of metropolis. And there was a presentation in Bordeaux about the meaning of chaos. But we ended in Europe, and even in the US, we stopped the discussion about the city for quite a few years now, and the attention now turns around architectural projects with the experience of colonialism, and we understood that the only context where one can have urban projects the old way are places where democracy is not very powerful, like Emirates, Taiwan, Hong Kong. It took place through planning, but it was done only where the central power is too strong. We now have serious ecology issues and anthropology and migration problems, and we need to think about the city, and we need to refocus our attention on the city. So it's not about rebuilding that power, unitary power of the city that doesn't work. When you push one button, and when you push the button of ecology, there are also other questions in parallel. So we need to be ready to act tactically speaking. You have a strategic plan, right? The strategic plan is not the conceptual version of a real plan. A strategic plan is a series of tactics and things that the city can achieve, but we know they cannot all be achieved together one time. So we need to act and consider the ecology, the environment, and what it also means to other issues. If we have major attractions like the mosque, for example, we need to consider that we cannot draw the city in all these dimensions. If you want to prepare Algiers for the tourism celebration like in Venice, you have to restore the Casbah, refocus all your energy on the Casbah, or organize the waterfront and all the connections. But if you want a city that lives, you need to conduct smaller actions, knowing that We don't know. We cannot know what happens. Sorry for my poor French. Your French was perfect. Thank you very much for your intervention. And I also wanted to say that you also spoke about the different actions, smaller actions. And we spoke about a matrix, remember? And that matrix could carry all the different issues. You spoke about sustainable development, the environment, and the connections. Now, the question is, can an urban matrix help simultaneously? Because the problem, I believe, and you've mentioned it, is that there is a gap, chronology gap between the different actions in terms of scale. Either it's the major actions or the smaller ones that are not connected, or in terms of segments and disciplines, here again, they are not interconnected. So what could link all these actions, urban actions, in a strategic plan or in another plan, so as, and would that not require switching to urbanism instruments and tools that we've mentioned in this discussion? This is just to say that the question that we want to debate here, I think that the matrix is a tactic to study mutual relations, and also the horizontal matrix needs priorities. And I believe that the discussion in a community of architects and citizens, but also interested stakeholders, should focus on the priorities. Is it protection? Is it future design? Is it housing for people? So we need a matrix, but also a series of priorities. Otherwise, the matrix wouldn't work. Thank you. Yes, Samia? Perhaps I can answer. I would see even a lot of cobwebs where they can be made and suppressed in a continuous manner, and therefore we need strategies. Absolutely. Someone wants to say anything, but just to close the discussion of this panel, Larbi? Did you want to say anything? There are two microphones, actually.
Donc, j'étais juste...
Referred to something that I saw in front of the Jardin des Plantes this morning, which was a really wonderful sign that was broadcasting the sort of idea of these gardens and the ecology of the city into a kind of larger ethos for, you know, a kind of ethic of people's relationship to the city. And it brings to mind something that you mentioned about the Xi's notion of the what was the phrase? Green city, green golden city. And in the United States right now, there's a very important political movement that's just starting, that's making a very strong argument in favor of what's being framed as a Green New Deal, which refers to a very old kind of socialist, publicly interested in investment in infrastructure, but arguing to do this kind of new infrastructure in a manner that's ecological, that's sustainable, and I think that something like this should be a kind of global, you know, non-aligned movement among among, even if our government doesn't happen to be sympathetic to it at the moment, it's bubbling up from below, and that we must, as a community of nations and of people, and I think that this can also start from something very ground level, like the cleaning from top to bottom the city, planting the city, fixing in small ways to polish this kind of immense jewel that Algiers is, because I don't think, in a sense, it needs to be added to, but to kind of be polished into this the kind of spectacular place it already is.
Merci, merci Stéphane.
Il reste quand même surpeuplé.
Thank you, Larbi. A final word. It will be complicated. Perhaps two final words. I just wanted to say that when we analyze the territory of Algiers, considering the political events that occurred on it, we can, for example, review the elections map of 1990. And when we analyze the way things occurred, a lot of politics took over space. So you've got the official Algiers, and then you've got the real Algiers, and you've got the parallel economy that drafted the territory. Today we spend billions on the old downtown, whereas those billions, the real billions, are circulated in Al-Hamis town. So since 1990, politics have given the contour of the territory, and there are mechanisms in place that operate quite well. Al-Hamis is a modern town with its own economy and business code, not the official one, not many tax collectors in Al-Hamis town, and there is a link with the government and taxes that through a real territory that we architects do not see because we need rules to understand. But this meeting today about Algiers allows us to see how we can link the formal and the informal, both politically and socially. One last word, Hakim, as he said, and to continue, in terms of we need two levels. We need an instrumental urbanism, a philosophy urbanism, a major strategy, a forecast urbanism, society projecting itself in the future because the city contains a society and we cannot disrupt both. And the second level of urbanism, where we need to focus, is that of community. So there is the outside plan and then the inside plan. And the inside plan and the outside plan will quickly take us to a question that we need, a concrete question about governance. What is the central doing and what is the local doing? And this inside urbanism, that of the dead end, of the perspective, of the stairs, is as important as the upper one, where we talk about disruption. And that is where we are at the philosophical level, where we need to agree, but never forget there is the inside urbanism that needs to be local at the town council, within the population, and the choice of the population, because the man has to remain at the disposal of the mechanisms, not the other way around. So Halim would like to say something. Jamal? I just wanted to say a few words about what was said earlier. I feel that what's missing in Algiers, well, in this revelating afternoon, is that there are very few events about Algiers and the city and urbanism. And we need to have a permanent discussion or a permanent exhibition discussing what the concepts that we've heard today, going from the smallest to the largest. I agree with urbanism that links both scales, the extra-local and the vision or the strategy. But to do so, we need to have a project culture. In 45 minutes, you cannot instill that culture. And we've got here figures coming from around the world. I think we haven't done anything in 45 minutes, but that was the purpose, actually. For it to work, there has to be permanent debate, permanent exhibition. And I spoke earlier about the disorder ecology, but I think that background problem is society and the population, because any citizen wants to be given the floor on the future of their territory today, and the closest territory. And I think that this horizontal feature is being built in some sort of permanent map, and we need to build it within a debate, within a permanent exhibition. And if this idea that you've created, the Algiers meeting, if we can make it permanent, then it would be wonderful, because we want it to be outside of Algiers, perhaps in another city of Algeria, or perhaps in another city, in another continent, in another country with another culture. And that is why I'm thinking of Donald now. I wanted to say two things. The first thing is that the morphology and the geography of Algiers already gives answers to many of the questions that were raised, because the bay and the sea is a structure, not only a geography. So it's connected to the land, and we spoke about Algeria and the things. The second consideration is urban experts who are lost, and architects in restructuring the idea can become important actors to connect the discipline on the one hand, and on the other hand, which is not at all disciplinary. So a sort of interface for architects. Absolutely. The debate was very interesting. Thank you very much. And the purpose was also to not to answer all questions, and to have further meetings to continue this discussion. Thank you all. There have been so many questions asked by text and by Facebook. You can go on social networks to answer those questions, because we've gone beyond the time now. I would like to invite the second panel about engineering, technology and finance, Mr. Farouk Shiali, Abdelatif Baghli, Riyad Hartani, Hakim Soufi, who is not with us unfortunately, Mr. Nordin Taibi, Mr. Yazid bin Mohub, I don't think he's here either, Mr. Mohamed Khalfawi, who just joined us, thank you, and Reda Kesantini.
Reda, tu es là? OK. Donc, en fait,
we're going to try and catch up the time that we've consumed earlier. In this panel, what is interesting is, while still being linked to the urban and architectural and city question, we asked ourselves this simple question. Today, we always start questions with today. Today, what are new tracks to explore in the implementation of major strategic projects? And this is where imagine all the connections and possibilities that can be open. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Shiali. Peace be upon you. Thank you very much for the invitation and for organizing this day. I believe that after having heard the panel about the urbanism tools and the visions, we need to put all this into concrete words. And this panel is about finding ways to achieve all these issues and opening the Bay of Algiers and developing relations between East and West, but also developing the eastern and western regions of Algiers. And I believe that the purpose is to find a way to find financial solutions, because we may have wonderful ideas, but if you don't have the resources for such policy, then it will always remain in boxes, like what Le Corbusier did with the vision then, which was futuristic then. I believe that opening this panel and the idea about Algiers, and we spoke Algiers Bridge, and we spoke about urbanism and architecture earlier. I think that the Algiers Bridge, and when we say bridge, it's both physically and more than that. The bridge is connection between a point and another, a society and another. And I believe that if we want to put this project into concrete words, then financial resources can be found if we are able to convince and persuade investors, because the economic situation of Algeria today perhaps doesn't allow us to envisage its construction, its achievement, but eventually it is a very profitable economic solution, because we are not able to master the cost of time throughout traffic in the bay and road traffic security. And when we give examples from around the world, for example, China, which built a bridge between Qinbiao and the island of Wangjiao, we're talking about a 40-kilometer bridge. It's a motorway too, amid the sea. And they found it profitable because it created a movement, an economic movement. It created time movement between both edges of the bay. And if the financial and profitability and economic studies, I think that it is profitable. And if we are able to find the arguments allowing us to convince public authorities, it's about having financing not from the government, not government equity, because that requires external funding, perhaps from multinational companies, with economic and financial studies. And I would like to invite here Nacym and the initiators of the project to conduct the economic and financial, as well as traffic and other studies that can persuade the government to provide resources in order to see that this bridge achieved. I believe that it is a necessity, and we can defend this argument. You've got all my support for us to continue with you this adventure. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Nacym, the floor is yours. Abdellatif Baghli, who is coming from Tlemcen, the University of Tlemcen, engineer in civil engineering, and in addition to you, who did the University of Lausanne, and one of the first graduates. Abdellatif, the floor is yours. So I would like to, first of all, hail your initiative. That is very important, and I hope that it will bring fruit. The question that you asked, what are the elements in terms of engineering, technology, and funding for this project? First of all, I would like to say that this project, when I saw somehow the scope of this project, I am in the idea that it is more of a program than a plan, because a program that will give birth to various other project. It's a program that is very of a paramount importance given its density. It is just not connecting an edge to another. It is more than that. It will allow to promote this bay while looking at it. In general and overall, when we build a gate, it is to cross something. And we are in this idea not to only cross the street, but to stop and look around the environment, marine environment, the bay, the piers of Algiers, and all that. So the thinking is quite important and the vision is quite important before getting to the tools for the construction, the technology. It is very important to think, to give a topic, subject matter to be discussed. It is quite interesting because you asked the audience, you shared your ideas with the audience and with all the citizens, our nationals and beyond. It is an example that can be taken for Algiers, but also for all the capitals of the world. It is true that we are a panel that's going to talk about a very technical area, which is the engineering, but that involves also the symbolic of it. It is of the strategy that needs to be set in place. We have various elements that will come beforehand, because as soon as we launch the technical area, it will be very difficult to move back. And the investment is very important. So we have to think ahead, to think very well about this program that I will call a program, because it encompasses various projects. We have to think about the technology, the techniques, the construction techniques used throughout the world. We talked about the gate that in China, the gates. We have various cities and capitals that identify themselves through various projects. We talked about Paris, the Eiffel Tower, or the Big Arc, and all the big cities are identified through one or two monuments. We are in front of a symbolic that needs to be taken into consideration. What will be, and the engineering side, what needs to be set in place for the operation, not only the connectivity, but the operation of the bay. How will we operate this bay? You are talking about floating islands. It is a huge project. And for the funding area will not be an issue. We have this tendency to be frightened from this area. It is, I think, an opportunity of investment, an opportunity to create employment around the city. You cannot imagine, if we move this conversation forward and deepen this conversation, what that kind of project can generate as development, as employment. It is great. And it can be an element to boost the economy within Algiers. And here again, we have a lot can be said regarding this element. My point of view regarding this topic is to set up a certain number of ways in order to be able to propose something that is concrete. There is something that can be done within the universities. Universities, academicians can be involved. You know that each year we have hundreds of end of graduation projects, and that can be implemented. And from that, we can read them through, and we can come up with projects that can allow, over time, to launch a thinking, to agree, and to have the agreement of all the stakeholders, to have a consensus, a local agreement. Because we have to think about the inhabitants of the Kasbah, the inhabitants of Algiers, at regional and local point of view. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Abdelatif. Riyad Hartani has a flight right now, so we have to give him the floors. He's going to tell us, all Riyad Hartani. He is behind the Algiers Smart City, and he's traveling the world. And we had difficulties to track him, so we are very delighted to have him among us. So I would like him to give me his impression about this project, but also what are the new ways and means offered by this future of tomorrow, the city of the future that we can develop through the technology. Thank you and good afternoon. The question is, I will read it another one. What will be the new ways to be explored when it comes to strategic projects? I don't know if I will speak directly from the Algiers, the Jazair. I will see it as a project that is, I would think it's a metaphor that's to discuss another complex project. So I will go through history, and I am used to say if there is a complex project to be set in place, we will set in place. And how can we do that? And how can promote new technologies to set it in place? So two elements. The first thing is, why is it important to have projects complex that gathers energies, and second is how can we implement them on the ground. For the first question is if we review the various countries of the world where things or new cities have been a success, and I put myself in the ICTs where I'm much involved, but there are other elements is to discuss museums also. But for the ICTs, and the economies of the world that were successful, we always track some federating projects that have been set in place with the consensus, a multidimensional consensus. And we will work on something in this element, how this element will be snowball over other things. So we don't have the time to get into details, but I think that it's very important to have a successful ecosystem, to have a federating project where everybody agrees on the objective, what needs to be done, how to do it, the means of to do it, and set in place the mechanism to implement it. The aspect or the notion of federating project is very important. I can see it as a federating project that will be successful or not, but at least while doing so, we are digging in and we are digging deeper and also getting new things. So I think it's very important to have project. Without project, we will have the critical mass. The second question is, how can we have successful complex projects like this one or others that have been designed in Algiers, Algeria, but also throughout Algeria? For me, it's very simple. In order to be successful in complex projects, it goes to human resources. You have the right people, the competencies, the expertise, because the rest will follow. If you have the expertise and the human resources, the funding will come, the investment comes, the implementation will follow. If we don't have all that, that will not be taking place, and that will not move forward. So with that kind of project do we have the human resources? Do we have the right human resources? We can say yes, no, maybe. But very quickly, the question, and I'm working on other projects in Algiers, the history or the story will be how to develop capacity building of these human resources to be important, to be stakeholder in this complex project. And I will maybe focus on this element, how to develop this human resource, this expertise while using ICTs throughout the world. And where is the opportunity? How develop a human resource for the Algiers Smart City that was a smart federating project? The human resource development was based on the presumption that we have to target ICTs proper to be used, but also we have the right people, well trained, and we need two people who will take time to be trained and to train the trainees and to have a snowball effect. So I think that, first of all, we have to review the question how to have the expertise to develop those projects and to set up a strategy to have this expertise, have them over time, and to have it at multi-layers in order to be successful on such projects. We can use this strategically more than this element. Thank you very much, Riyad, and for your analysis, very relevant analysis. I think we have a coffee break right now, so I think that it will be this panel. We will keep on with Reda Khalfawi, Mohamed Taibi, and the group. We take a coffee break and come back later. Thank you very much. I would like, first of all, invite our press people to a press conference with the organizers of this event. I would like to get closer